Hey, everybody. It is Sleepy Reader, aka Damien. And here we are again with my comic book thoughts video, generally weekly. I have 11 comic books that I bought on Wednesday, May 12th, and I'm finally giving you my thoughts here on Wednesday, May 19th. It's Wednesday morning, so at lunchtime, I'll probably head over to the comic book store and grab some comics. Some new comics. But in the meantime, I still wanted to give you my thoughts on these 11, and I'll do it as usual in my countdown that's based on my ranking things in terms of my enjoyment of reading them. So all the comics I read this past week were in kind of the B and A zone. So it was a little hard to rank them. Like there was a bunch of A comics, of giving them grades, and a bunch of B comics, no C's or D's or F's this time around, which is a great thing. So my lowest ranked comic for my personal enjoyment was at number 11, Silver Coin, issue number 2. This is the series that every issue is drawn by Michael Walsh, and there's a different writer on each issue, and I guess each story will in some way involve the silver coin. I don't know. That's an eyeball there, isn't it? I thought maybe that's the silver coin there. This is the silver coin on this cover? Or is that eyeball actually... No, I don't think so. The fact that the silver coin's not on the cover kind of tells you something. The problem with this comic is... So this one was a kind of the lowest rank. Would have been like, say, a B minus if I were giving letter grades. It has great art and color, which I think Michael Walsh did his own color too. Yeah, Lines, Colors, and Letters by Michael Walsh. And so it's kind of an anthology horror comic where each story somehow involves this silver coin. But the involvement of the silver coin in this issue was very perfunctory and just sort of slapped in there. And overall, I felt to a degree that Kelly Thompson, the writer on this, who I've heard is a good writer, I don't think I've read any Kelly Thompson comics yet, that it felt like she phoned it in a bit. You know, she had kind of an idea of, let's do the camper slasher movie with the mean girls and the one girl who's being treated badly in the cabin. There's one drawing that didn't come out so well, but most of the Michael Walsh art is very nice. So we get a whole montage of all the cruel things that are being done to this girl in camp. And then the worst thing is they cut her hair and she goes running off into the woods and finds a strange cabin. I do like how the crow there says no. But she goes in and... there is a knife with a bunch of mystic stuff around it, and I now realize the knife has the silver coin on it. I before, when I watched read this, I'm sorry, I seem to be going out of focus because I need to stay further back. When I read this, I didn't notice the silver coin there at the time. I noticed it later on. So now I'm seeing in every scene that we can see the silver coin. So somehow the silver coin is in this machete. She picks it up. Someone else is attacking her. And we're given the impression that she is killed. But there's a twist. And all the other girls get killed brutally. It's very bloody. I didn't think the twist was very clever. It just felt very standard slasher movie kind of thing. There may have, I've only watched a certain number of slasher movies, a few Halloween movies, and maybe a few others. So there may be references and clever stuff involving those references to other slasher stories that I don't know, maybe. But overall, I felt like the guest writer on this issue did a very minor job. And just, it seemed, we see at the end, the coin rolls off the knife and it goes onto a log in the lake, meaning the coin will pass on to some other story, I guess. But it would have seemed like to me it would have been very easy to incorporate the coin earlier into the story and somehow connected up more to what was going on. Because it was all done very well by Chip Zdarsky in the first issue. That said, I really like the art, and I'm curious what each new author will do with this silver coin concept. It looks like the next issue will be by Ed Brisson, who I know for kind of his crime comics, I believe. So that should be interesting. Up at number 10 is American Vampire, which, as I've said before, kind of reminds me of BPRD and that kind of thing, with a group who's fighting against an evil group who wants to bring out on the Cthulhu-like return of the old one to suck dry the earth. And it's fun. There's all kinds of interesting characters. I think it's not like, I love Raphael Albuquerque's art, but it feels like it's not maybe his very best art. And maybe Dave McKay's, I've liked Dave McKay's Dave McCaig's coloring a lot in the past, but maybe it just leaves the story a little dry or something. Maybe a story like this needs to pop a little more pizzazz or something. I don't know. That's just a guess. At points, I wondered if he's drawing this character, Skinner Sweet, to look a little bit like a relative of Scott Snyder. I don't know if you've seen pictures of Scott Snyder, but he has one eyebrow that raises higher than the others. He doesn't have a hairdo or mutton chops like this, but maybe he would have in the 1970s. So overall, it's very fun. I keep forgetting or distracting myself from my main point, which is it still stays on the lower edge because it assumes basically that you've read the other American Vampire stories. There's all kinds of character beats that you can tell are based on something you haven't read if you, like me, just picked up American Vampire 1976 because you assumed it would stand alone. So probably a fun book, but a much bigger reward for people who've been following American Vampire all along. Grendel Devil's Journey, number 6 of 8, comes in at number 9 for me. I have a lot of affection for this Grendel series. I've enjoyed all the little science fiction touches along the way. And it looks like, unlike all the other issues, this is at least a 2-part story. We're now on a planet that seems very habitable to Earthlings. Grendel is searching for a planet to restart the human race on, but it already has 3 sentient species on it who seem to all live together in kind of a medieval society whose laws are held together by personal combat. So you are right if you win, and you have to kill the other person. And so Grendel is kind of setting out to kind of undo this custom before he considers bringing the human race to live with these people, which may or may not be a good idea. And so that part's intriguing. But the whole medieval world science fiction with personal combat as your main trial didn't strike me as super, super original. So it's a fun comic to read for sure, and I really enjoy it. But I think it's because of that sense of over-familiarity that I put it where I did in my ranking of enjoyment. So that all of those are like B comics, maybe a B plus comic, or maybe even a little higher. It's hard to say, but Batman the Detective, number 2 of 6. I didn't think I'd be picking up any more Batman for a long while, but I was tempted by the first Batman the Detective because I was just curious to see what Tom Taylor would do with a core Batman story. But it really is perhaps more of an Elseworlds Batman story, but it's really good. Tom Taylor does a really good job. Is it Adam Kubert or Andy Kubert? Andy Kubert does a great job. Colorist Brad Anderson is doing a good job. So it's a very intriguing story with these villains who all dress up kind of like Batman and are out to erase all the progress of Batman. And they are vicious and pretty horrible people. My computer just went to sleep on me. I wish some executive at Apple were watching this and say, why would an Apple computer go to sleep on you while you're recording a video? What the retarded concept is that? And both Apple computers I've had during the time that I've been doing my 9 years of video here have done that to me. When I shoot on the iPad, that doesn't happen. So anyway, I really enjoyed this. I'm not putting it on my pull list. I still sort of feel, when I read it, I still feel kind of a tinge of, Batman still feels too familiar to me, like I need more time off from Batman. But I think this is a really, really good Batman story. And the first issue at $3.99, normal $3.99 comics now usually have 20 pages. It had, 25 or 26 pages of art. This one has 22, so it's still got a higher than normal page count. I don't know what that's about, but that's cool. And I really like the paper it's printed on. It's that matte paper. I don't know if all DC Comics are using that matte paper. I don't think American Vampire. No, American Vampire's on a shinier paper. But really liked the paper here, and the color worked well on that paper. It's maybe not totally matte, but very close to matte paper, I suppose. And speaking of DC, I put at number 7, The Dreaming. And this may be kind of the matte paper. It's weird. It seems like there's all kinds of gradations of paper, even within DC Comics. You can see great art, great color here. Who is the art and color team? The credits aren't at the front. They're at the back. The art is by Nick Robles, with a few pages by someone named M.K. Perker, and colors by 2 different colorists, Matt Lopez and Chris Sotomayor. Interestingly, I didn't notice the change. Now that I'm looking for it, I think that might be the different artist there. Anyway, The Dreaming, which I loved for the first 4 or 5 issues, is working its way back into my affections. It's too bad there's only 2 more issues left, but this was a very good story taking place in the land of fairy. And I forget who, this is part of my failing of remembering what happened in the last issue. There's someone who's taken over as queen of the land of fairy, and she's not doing a very good job of it. And she's taking the advice of evil advisors. And interestingly, we've got the king of fairy, I guess that's Oberon probably, disguised as a woman, and as an old woman. And we have a scene where he has a conversation with his one-time wife. But she doesn't, he's an old woman in this conversation. I thought that was a cool touch. Do they name her? Is she Ariel? I don't know who the name of the queen is. Anyway, a really interesting, cool kind of comic. Willow Wilson is working her magic again. In at number 6, a perennial favorite of mine, and the penultimate issue is Birthright. And this almost could be a final issue, but he throws in a twist at the end so that there's one more dangling thread to deal with in the final issue. But this issue was really bittersweet. They manage a brief visit back to Terranos, where their parents have now been trapped. They don't talk too much about the time difference, but I assume the parents have been there for many years during the months that they have been searching for them. And, on an emotional level, I would have liked the family to just stay in Terranos all together at the end. That seems fitting to me. And Terranos is now finally being able to, is no longer under the thumb of the Dark Lord and is rebuilding itself and will become kind of a fantasy paradise. So wouldn't that be a great place for the family to stay forever? But instead, one of the sons has to stay behind to send the parents back. And one of the sons goes back with them. So the family is still divided, which I think is the whole theme of family and not being able to be with your children or guide your children is kind of one of the major themes of this within its epic fantasy framework. So anyway, really cool issue. Unless you've been reading Birthright all along, I would say read all the trades if you like epic fantasy. And speaking of epic fantasy, but with a totally different spin and flavor, the very unique Canto and the City of Giants. This I put in at number 5. I really liked it. I think I was digging this new artist on it in the first issue, but I felt like I was a little less into the art in the second issue. It wasn't bad or anything. I'm ranking at number 5 in a group of very good comics. But there was something a little less appealing, like these scenes with the maze and stuff. I somehow wanted more from it. But Canto continues to have this great sort of cross between epic fantasy and children's fairy tales, and just an ineffable quality, you might say. So I guess I heard Bullseye Bob say, I think I heard him say there's only 3 issues. So I'm a bit disappointed in that. I feel like it could go on for maybe 5 issues or something. But nevertheless, I'm really enjoying it. And it'll be cool to see how they wrap this up then in one more issue. Kind of a surprise to me, one of my favorite comics of the week was Geiger number 2, which I almost didn't get. It's not on my pull list. I'm pulling it off the shelves. And it's the first issue had beautiful art by Gary Frank, and the second issue, I felt like the art, Gary Frank upped his game from there. So that's very impressive. Very good Gary Frank art. And I felt like Jeff Johns showed us more of what he's up to in this book. And even though it's just full of very familiar post-apocalyptic tropes, I think he is onto something a little more special here. I think it's going to be, I'm guessing now from this issue, this is about families and families struggling to survive. And that gives it an extra powerful layer to its post-apocalyptic style. So I'm looking forward to see how this continues. And yeah, they're doing a really good job. So I'm still undecided whether to put it on my pull list, because I always feel like once I put something on my pull list, if I then take it off the pull list, I'm making life a drag for my comic book shop. But I think I can find it on the shelves anyway. Just because I'm still not sure if I want to stick with it. I really enjoyed this issue. It looks like it's going in a really good direction. But we'll see. I'm the great cynic now with a lot of things. I'm not sure they'll pull it off over the long run just because there's a good issue. But that was a very good issue of Geiger. Another good issue was Carmen. Somehow I water damaged this copy. And I'm tempted to buy another copy, but that seems silly because I will probably double dip and get the hardback trade if and when that comes out. So I put Carmen at number 3. Could easily have been number 1 in many ways. I think it's an excellent issue, and it gives us some new insight into these whatever Carmen is, these creatures that help people move from one life to the next. We now, spoilers a bit, so skip ahead a little bit. We now know that Carmen is part of perhaps a group of people who help people move from one life to the other, that we're in a world of reincarnation. At least that's what we're told at this point. A new sort of thing that Gilliam Marsh is doing in this issue is including more drawings that look like they're taken with a fisheye lens. And it changes the tone of the book somehow, and makes it more wistful and feeling like your time is up, maybe. In earlier issues, it thought like we might just float forever having fun. There was that Little Nemo in Dreamland kind of feel, but we've come back. The computer did it again, fell asleep again. We've come back, and I have this little program that looks like a coffee cup that's supposed to tell it to sleep not to sleep. It's called caffeine, I think. After the first time it fell asleep, I remembered to click the little coffee cup of caffeine. But maybe with the new operating systems, they've overridden that, and that app won't work anymore. Damn you, Apple computers. And yeah, some of you Windows computers users will tell me how much better Windows is, but I have a Windows computer and I don't find myself using it very much. So I'm pissed at Apple, but I still think I'd rather work on an Apple for now. Maybe I just don't have the right Windows computer, but that's also a problem with Windows, finding the right one. It's easier with a Mac. Sorry for that interlude. What was I saying about this? Anyway, I kind of miss I didn't rank this at number 1, which I might have, given how great it is. But I kind of missed that. Now that it's getting down to brass tacks and maybe being extra tough on our character, I kind of miss just the fun of some of the earlier stuff. So, but anyway, where is it? Where will this go next? I'm not sure, and that's kind of exciting in and of itself. Definitely one of the best comics currently out on the shelves. Also, perhaps the best, or has been the best of the last few years, Ice Cream Man, which I'm putting at number 2. This would be an A+ comic. This is Ice Cream Man back on top. There were a few issues there where I felt like maybe Ice Cream Man had run out of stuff to say, or clever ways to say it. But this has a lot to say, and it's in very clever ways. This telethon episode about a telethon, someone has to send in some money, pledge something to let this guy live, otherwise he's going to die. And so we alternate between this telethon and scenes from his quote real life, or real life scenes of his life, where, like for instance, the doctor says you're perfectly healthy, and then we also get some ads, joke TV ads for different products that play into the theme of this. And Martin Morazzo's artwork has never been better. The colors look awesome. This is a pretty incredible issue. It's probably objectively a better book than my number 1. But the book I just had the most fun reading this week of my new comics was Time Before Time. I can't even remember the title because I just see the big time. Maybe that's a problem with the logo. This Time Before is barely visible. This one is written by Declan Shalvey, or perhaps Declan Shalvey and one other person. I don't know if they credit who's the writer, but I think it means these two guys, Declan Shalvey and Rory McCoonville, wrote it, and I assume Joe Palmer drew it, and Chris O'Halloran did the colors, and Hassan Osami Atsame El-Hao did the lettering. I know that name's familiar as a letter. So that means it's the same colorist, I believe, as, totally different. Okay, so this is Chris O'Halloran coloring, and that is Chris O'Halloran coloring. This is colored in a cool way, except on the page, it looks better digitally on the screen here. On the page, the colors weighed it down a little too much. There's like a hazy quality to the colors that I love the color choices, but that sense of like a hazy filter on the colors bothered me. I'm sure he had his reasons, but despite that, I really liked the storytelling of the art, and it's a really cool setup to kind of a dystopian time travel story. And this guy who's kind of, they don't explain it fully, but he's kind of like an indentured servant. He owes money or whatever to the time travel company, where he guides people to different times so they can escape times that are bad. And so the job is dangerous. There's not enough radiation shielding on their ships. They're slowly going to get sick from doing it. And then when a time ship breaks down, they take it out of his pay. And he's got this buddy who also works there, and they're making plans for how to kind of escape this form of enslavement. But things don't turn out the way they were hoping to. So I just thought this was a really great first issue setup for what might, because you'd never know. It's a great setup, but the story itself perhaps hasn't started yet, but it might be a really great kind of unique time travel story. But it's certainly in the setup different than any time travel story I have read before. And as a science fiction fan, I just got a big thrill out of it and really enjoyed it a lot. A lot of pages for your $2.99, or your $3.99. I didn't count them, but I would guess over 30 pages plus text material. So if I didn't say that one's number one. I ran into a lot of, as I was reading, thinking, there's something absurd about reviewing single issues. You should review trades because that's where you know whether the story actually worked or not. And there's something ridiculous about stubbornly sticking to these books because you forget what happened, or things are just so written for the trade. But I still, as I think I've said it many times before, I like that momentum of the weekly reading and reading the individual issues. And for instance, there are two trades I mentioned last week that I hadn't finished yet, and I still haven't finished them. I didn't go back to them. I read other trades, and several of those trades weren't any good. And I suppose if I'd read them in single issues, I would have dropped them after an issue or two. So there's trade-offs to the trade reading. But I think really, especially because I do these videos, I like that I'm keeping up with all the books that I'm getting. And one might be a bit of a disappointment, and one might be really exciting. And it's kind of fun to see if the comic gets better or gets worse, even though that's, maybe not the best approach to reading because they're all, or most of these are written for trade. Should emphasize for anyone who doesn't get Ice Cream Man, it's not written for trade. Every single issue you can read by itself. There's nothing in this issue except for seeing the Ice Cream Man on the cover to imply that that this is connected to any other issue of the Ice Cream Man. I think ice cream appears somewhere in it. Oh yeah, they're selling this Rick's Raspberry Surprise ice cream in one of the ads. So that's the closest to a linkage to the Ice Cream Man character, who used to appear with more frequency in it, but he was just sort of a recurring theme. But there's no telling with this Time Before Time if this great issue is really going to lead into a great trade read. I don't know. Carmen, can't tell where it's going. I think this would be a guaranteed great read in single issues or trades. And on. Geiger will probably be a better read in trades, just in terms of forgetting things, but there is that excitement. It is a well-structured book for a serial comic. Jeff Johns, the writer of this, really knows how to do that serial writing kind of thing. And the other thing that makes it addictive to me to read the single issues is, well, as I've struggled to say before, a good comic to me is a hit of a lot of story. By that synergy of words and images, you get a lot coming into your head in a short amount of time. And I kind of like reading an issue and then letting it sit, let it stew in my brain, rather than moving on to the rest of the story right away. And sort of when you read a whole trade, you push through it and it doesn't marinate in your brain the same way, if that makes sense. So like this Canto thing, I think I'm enjoying Canto more in single issues than when I read the first one in trade, just because I get to sort of savor it in these smaller bites, even though it's definitely written for the trade and in many ways reads better in the trade. So I a while ago tried to make a video where I highlighted all the people who talked about new individual issues on a weekly basis. And I tried to get fancy and I was editing it. And by the time I was halfway through editing it, 3 or 4 of those channels, YouTube channels, stopped dealing with weekly issues that way. They maybe just did hauls or game shows or whatever. And so I kind of threw that on the backside. But I think I want to list below the people who deal with single issues that I can think of off the top of my head right now, which includes Bob at Everything Comics. He most weeks does a review show of the recent comics he read. And almost totally without fail, Robbie of Pop Culture, I forget the last bit of his, anyway, it'll be down below. He does his weekly review of comics, and it is awesome. And sort of a great resource because he reviews so much. And another really good resource, they do it a little later in the week on Sundays, is from Comics Will Break Your Heart. Does a Sunday live episode with her pal, who I can't remember the name of. Sorry. Anyway, there's 2 of them. They're on Comics Will Break Your Heart. Jen and brain fart. I should have done my research or wrote things down. But anyway, they are really up on what's going on in current comics, and they talk about a lot of comics from the past week, of whatever week that is. And that's a great resource, too, of looking at what's coming out and getting some really strong opinions on those, which is great. And then we've got the comic Concierge, who is doing, I think it's morphing a little bit. He was doing a weekly countdown also. And the last time he did a countdown of the top 10 comics he read that week, because he reads a lot of comics. Is there anyone else who does? Let me know of people that you like to watch who talk about the brand new comics of the week. I can't think of who else really does a focused show on that at the moment. Well, when I think of more in other videos, I will mention them and put links to them below. So I'll talk to you all soon. I hope you're having a great week in comic book reading, and cheers.